Hello everyone, Cosmic Castaway here, and welcome to Let's Talk About, the show where I ramble on about various video game topics. And today's subject is Mass Effect Andromeda. So I had actually planned to do a game reflections video on Mass Effect Andromeda a while back, but I wasn't happy with the way the end result turned out. As I was recording and editing the video together, I just felt like I didn't properly explain my feelings for why I enjoyed the game, especially with all the controversy surrounding it at the time. I felt like I didn't quite put enough effort in explaining my point of view. So I wanted to try to do that today, as well as responding to some of the controversy surrounding the game, and kind of how I felt about the whole gaming community response to Mass Effect Andromeda in general. So I guess I'll start off with my own personal opinion of the game. I've had a bit of a mixed relationship in the past with the Mass Effect series. I love the story and the lore and the world and the characters. That is the biggest part of the Mass Effect series that I enjoy. Just the rich story, the characters, the storytelling, all the choices you can make. The gut-wrenching choices, actually, in many of the games have always been one of the big draws. But on the flip side, I've never been into the gameplay aspect as much. Those of you who have followed my channel for a while now know that I'm not the biggest fan of cover-based shooting. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that particular genre of game, it's just not my personal cup of tea. And even though Mass Effect has some really heavy RPG elements, at the core of the gameplay it is a cover-based shooter. And so I sometimes had trouble getting into the gameplay aspect of the Mass Effect series. For Andromeda, however, even though cover-based shooting is still a big core of that game, I really enjoyed how they shook the formula up and made it a lot more mobile and kept the mobility in fights very focused. So that made my experience with the game a lot more fun and from a gameplay perspective. And I also like how with the Nomad exploring the planets, they brought back the element of the Mako from the first Mass Effect, which was something I really enjoyed, even though it did have a couple of issues. And I love how they improved on the problems that the Mako had with the Nomad, and it just makes running around the planets, exploring all sorts of stuff, all the more fun. And it was just something about the first Mass Effect game that I thought 2 and 3 didn't have, is that the galaxy just felt so big. And when you're exploring the planets on a surface with a vehicle like the Nomad, it just makes every single world just feel that much larger, and the galaxy as a whole that much larger. I like how they brought that element of the series back. I really enjoyed that. And of course, I loved the story and the characters. Regardless of what you think of the ending of Mass Effect 3, it was a bit limiting in what they could do with the story moving forward, so with Andromeda they smartly divert away from the Milky Way galaxy entirely and follow the colonists trying to settle in the Andromeda galaxy, which I think is a really fascinating premise, and I loved how the story had a more focus on exploration as opposed to just a galaxy at war as some of the previous Mass Effect games were. Not to say that the galaxy isn't in peril, as the Ket and the Scourge and all this other stuff going on presents all sorts of dangers. So I really enjoyed a lot of the story elements. I guess my only one I felt could have they can improve on a bit more if they do another installment is to make a stronger antagonist. The Archon, while very intimidating, isn't as interesting as some of the past villains in the series like Saren or Sovereign. Those are still my two favorite antagonists from Mass Effect. He does his job very well. He creates a strong central conflict to fight against, but I felt he could have been a bit more of an interesting character. So hopefully they'll make the Ket a bit more interesting moving forward. But as far as the other characters go, I love the squad mates in Mass Effect Andromeda. I love pretty much all the squad mates. I love Suvi, I love Drac, Peebee, Callow, and even though I didn't get to know Liam as much as the other characters, I've heard he does have some really fun storylines and quests that you can go on with him. So I loved a lot of the characters in Andromeda, maybe even more so than characters in the previous trilogy. So I guess to kind of wrap up my own personal thoughts about the game, as I said at the beginning, I'm not like the biggest fan of the Mass Effect series in the world, but I do have a lot of love for this franchise. I love the story and the characters, and I was really happy with what they did with this new game. I thought there were some really interesting plot points and character building and just world building that they did with the Andromeda galaxy. So I probably plan on playing a couple more playthroughs of Andromeda in the future, especially if they have some more story expansions down the road. But now I kind of want to segue into the response of the game when it came out. As most of you know, Mass Effect Andromeda launched to a bit of a rocky start. There were loads of technical issues and glitches around the first week or so when it came out. And admittedly, that is disappointing when that happens, that games aren't completely polished before they get pushed out the door. We've seen it happen before with games like Assassin's Creed Unity and Street Fighter V. It is disappointing, but at the same time, it makes me sad when parts of the gaming community just take this attitude of vicious cynicism and negativity and start personally attacking the studios who are responsible for developing these games. I'm sure the men and women who work on these titles put many long, hard hours into them and a lot of love and dedication. And even when games are launched with technical issues, I'm not defending that the technical issues are okay, because the developers should try to polish those out of the games as much as possible. But at the same time, it makes me sad, how some parts of the gaming community are just so vicious in attacking those who've worked so hard on these titles, and I think it's just a really unfair and unkind way to respond. There's so many better ways to give criticism to developers in a more positive tone, saying, we love the game, we like what you're doing, but please fix these issues because we're having trouble with them. I know I'm sometimes a bit too optimistic for my own good, but I would like to see the gaming community try to put aside some of the disappointment and anger when launches like Mass Effect Andromeda are a bit rocky, and EA is sometimes notorious for upsetting a lot of their consumer base, and I have had some issues with their decisions in the past, like the always online element of the last entry in the SimCity franchise. There is the issues that I take umbrage with, but at the same time, I just wish that and hope that we can be more kind and respectful in our criticism moving forward. Because there is a lot of fantastic stuff in games like Mass Effect Andromeda. It does have its fair share of problems, and thankfully some of those have been worked out with some of the more recent patches. I know I'm rambling. That is what Let's Talk About is all about, is me rambling about video games. But at this, I guess I'm just trying to say is, let's try to remember what being into video games is all about. It's about, at the end of the day, having fun. And trying to just enjoy these amazing adventures that all these people work so hard to build for us. And I enjoyed a great majority of my time with Mass Effect Andromeda. It took me about 35 hours to get through the whole thing, and I loved almost every minute of it. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is, even when games have issues at launch, because this will probably be something that happens repeatedly in the next couple of years, try to see it from the developer's point of view and know that they're working as hard as they can to fix the issues, because they want us to enjoy the game as much as they enjoyed making it, And BioWare's had a bit of a rough patch in response to criticism. I know they took a lot of flack from some people for Dragon Age 2, for the ending of Mass Effect 3, and now the launch of Mass Effect Andromeda. There's a lot of talent at BioWare, and I want to see what their next big game is, because they do a lot of great stuff. So thank you for listening to this episode of Let's Talk About, and don't worry, I have even more video content on the way. I got another Black Sheep coming up soon, and I have even more Game Reflections episodes on the way. So what are your thoughts about Mass Effect Andromeda? Did you enjoy the game? What did you think about the gaming community's response to it around the time it came out? Please feel free to share in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. So until next time, keep having great adventures, everyone!